Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're in class with us. Brad is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. Let me give you the call-in number if you'd like to call in. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. And I just want to mention, I've mentioned this over the air over the years, but I don't do it very often. When I say everyone all set, cocked, locked, here we go, I don't mean let's start shooting. What I mean is what the Boy Scouts taught me, the Cub Scouts taught me. Always be prepared. Be kind. Be helpful. But always be prepared. Like the guy in front of you on the interstate with the ladder in the back of his pickup truck and is kind of waving in the breeze, and you don't want that to come through your windshield. Be prepared for that and do something about it. Get out of the way. Okay? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say everyone all set, cocked, locked. But I am. I am cocked and locked. I do have a firearm. I do have one in the studio. So I'm prepared for all levels. But then again, I live in the middle of nowhere. With us today is Guineith Isaac. She's live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Well, you know, I'm very concerned about what's happening in America. Of course, all over the world as well. And so last night, I picked up the phone, and I called one of my friends. He's also an instructor here at USA Prepares. So I called him up, and I got his voicemail, and I asked him if he could call this morning before the broadcast, because I wanted to ask him about what's going on in Florida, what his thoughts are. And the message that I left for him was something like this, and I'm paraphrasing. Hey, Jim, it's Vin Finelli. You know, I've been reading the news, and it looks like the climate's a little chilly in your neck of the woods. You know, give me a call if you can, you know, before the broadcast, 8:30 or so. James called me. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about James Gray. James Gray is an instructor here at USA Prepares. He has been on the air with us numerous times talking about what's called an 80% assembled parts kit that you can build your own AR-15 from. Do I have one? Yes. Do family members have one? Yes. Have we built them? Yes. Do you have to build it yourself? Yes. Can you sell it? No. Okay, so if you want to build one of these things, you can, and you can buy them from a number of companies, and one of them is guns80.com, guns80.com. Welcome, James Gray.
Good morning, Vince.
Good morning. So am I exaggerating about the climate being a little chilly in your aisle of commerce?
Yeah, it seems like everything's a little bit cold right now. And they keep talking about legislation like they always do, and on top of that, you know, everybody thinks that because we've currently got a situation where we're a little more on the conservative side that their firearms are safe, but not really what we're seeing in the current political situation.
When we had the last presidential selection, previous president, not Donald Trump, but the previous one, what did that election seem to do to the marketplace that you saw? I know, James Gray, you're in Virginia, Roanoke, Virginia. By the way, class, I've been to their factory. I've been to their plant. And when I say factory, they actually take, and I saw this firsthand, I walked the entire factory floor. As a matter of fact, I drove my truck inside the factory. And they have machines to saw aluminum billet. They have CAD/CAM systems, CNC machines running to machine the parts. So they don't make everything, but they do make a significant portion of the guns80.com kits. So what have you seen in your neck of the woods or to the gun shows that you've attended? What have you seen in terms of commerce, transactions, then, 9 years ago and now?
Well, when we first got started, we got into the business around 2013, so about halfway through the previous president's terms, and we saw industry was doing well, firearm sales were up, all that, and then starting last year, right after the inauguration, the market took a dip for gun sales, and that's across all industries. That's including 80%. That's, I'm sure you probably heard the news. Smith & Wesson just sold out for about a quarter of what they were worth 4 years ago. And, we went to a couple of gun shows last year, and the foot traffic was unbelievably short. Before it'd be packed wall to wall, and now it's like, 4 or 5 people drift in, and it's so slow that, some of the vendors even pack up and leave before the end of the day on Sunday.
That's kind of what I thought it was like. So there was this concern, the previous administration, and now things look a little better for less concern for our team. And I guess everybody, most people might have already bought some of the firearms that they wanted to have. I guess that's my take on it. James Gray, you're the CFO, Chief Financial Officer of Guns80.com. What is your take on what's happening with these shootings?
There's a couple of things. We have to watch our elected representatives and make sure that they're not being reactionary to sensationalized news media, and are just coming up with bad plans that will end up being super restrictive legislation that basically end up taking away our personal rights and property.
Okay. Do you think that this current climate in Florida, where the students are demonstrating, the students are raising their voices, and I understand the concern, I really do, but I was a classroom teacher. I know what it's like to be in a classroom. And the students are asking for protection that I don't think can effectively be provided. They want it safe. But what does that mean? That means no guns. But that really doesn't mean no guns. That means no guns for people that don't want to have guns. I don't think that's a good way to go. Do you have a better way to go?
I think that there are several different ways that we could go about it, like, making sure that we have people armed that know how to use the weapon, and, they always talk about these background checks and all that, but the fact is that it's an antiquated system that's not working properly. And they talk about, let's restrict this, that, or the other thing, magazine capacities and the type of rifle you can use and all of this stuff. That doesn't do any good when when we're not even fixing the things that are already in place.
Okay.
So I think you're right. I think there are better methods.
How does gun registration have any impact whatsoever on preventing these shootings? So what I'm saying is, the other team, the people who want to confiscate our guns, a lot of them are saying, well, these aren't even registered, or some of these guns aren't registered, or how did that guy get that gun? And I think that's what you're saying. But how does gun registration prevent crime? How does that work?
As far as I can tell, gun registration doesn't actually prevent crime. The gun registration, the only thing that they do is they backtrack through when they find a gun that has been used in a crime, mind you, this is not, they have a crime that was committed with a gun, they found a gun that was used to commit a crime. They take that serial number off of that gun and they trace it from the manufacturer all the way down to whoever the end user was that purchased it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how does
that breaks down?
How many? Do we know the number of transactions or the number of hands or the number of owners that, on average, a rifle has or a handgun has? I mean, is it like 6 or 5 or 3 owners in a lifetime of a firearm? Do we know any of that?
I don't have that particular data, but I can tell you that it starts off going from manufacturer to usually a wholesaler, then to a dealer, and then to an individual. So, I mean, you've already got, 4 steps there before.
Yeah,
and that's
and then,
one individual.
Okay. All right, and let's say a person buys one at a gun show that's used, then that one has been through all of those steps, plus now someone is selling it. Now, sometimes the guy who's selling it or the gal who's selling it wasn't the original purchaser. It is somebody who bought it and said, you know what, I thought I liked it. I don't really like it all that much, so I'm going to sell it. And then the next guy gets it and says, you know what, I thought this was more to my liking than it really is, and he sells it. So now we're at step number 6. And have I been involved with some of those purchases of used guns? Yeah, I have. There are guns that are no longer manufactured that I thought would be really neat to have. And if you want one, you can't get one new. And by the way, who's to say that a new gun would commit or not commit a crime any more than a used gun? Or one with a serial number, or one without, or one that a person makes himself. I mean, there's a feeling that is being pushed on us that if someone buys an AR-15 from a kit, that person might be a criminal. Why is that? Really? So a criminal's going to have take the time to build his own rifle? Does that square with you, James Gray?
That's not that doesn't make sense to me. And the statistics that I looked up on the crime and 80% rifles just doesn't support that conclusion.
Right. I agree. So when we come back, Guineith Isaacs, I'd love to hear your comments. I know you've got some concerns about what's going on. Last couple minutes before the broadcast started, Guineith connected, and I connected, and I asked James Gray this morning to call in and be ready. And so just literally 2 minutes before the broadcast started, I asked Guineith on the off-air channel on this connection that I'm on right now, and she's on, and James Gray's on, all 3 of us were on. I said, would it be okay with you if we talked about this with James Gray? And it's okay if we, share your broadcast time with James Gray. She said, absolutely. Guineith, what are your thoughts? And by the way, thank you. What are your thoughts?
That's all right. If America heads down this path, it's going to be pure tyranny, not only for them, but for the entire world. That's it in a nutshell. Here in Australia, okay, let's start at the beginning. Australia's supposed gun-free status, and let me get this clear, Australia is not a nation that is yet totally disarmed, okay? But they're working on it. They're definitely working on it. There were 2 mass murderers who went crazy with firearms in Australia, who basically led to most of the guns being confiscated out of this country. It's absolutely a psyop, okay? It's a psychological operation to con you into something. Now, the first of those was a man, I think I've mentioned him on air before, called Julian Knight. That's Knight, and he's commonly referred to as being the Hoddle Street Killer. Okay, it's Hoddle Street Killer. Hoddle Street is a major inner suburban road in Melbourne. It's got 2 lanes going one way, 2 lanes going the other way, with a big traffic island in the middle. But you can go on the internet these days. You can Google search, street views of Hoddle Street and you can look up historical footage of Hoddle Street way back when on YouTube. Now, Julian Knight, my husband, Archie, actually knew Julian Knight because my husband ran a mission which was on Napier Street in Fitzroy, and Napier Street intersected Hoddle Street, and it's only about, not even a quarter of a mile from where Julian Knight did his massacre, was where my husband used to live. Now, what happened was Julian Knight came into the mission. Sorry. He came into the mission sometimes with two friends of his. Okay? These friends of his were Chris Reed and Damien Reed. Now, Chris Reed and Damien Reed were the half-brothers of Mark Reed, whose nickname was Chopper Reed, and he was a famous Melbourne gangster, okay, who was known for, giving his enemies very publicly a dose of lead poisoning. That's what Chopper Reed was. Everybody knew Chopper. And Chris Reed and Damien Reed were Chopper's half-brothers, and they hero-worshipped him. Okay? And Julian Knight hero-worshipped him as well. So there were these three, and at the time they would have been in their very late teens or early 20s. These three used to hang out together all the time. And Julian didn't, but Chris Reed and Damien Reed came into the mission and said, "Hey, Archie, guess what?" And Archie said, "What?" And he said, "We just joined the Army Reserves, Archie." This is the Australian Army Reserves. "Yeah, us and Julian Knight." And Archie said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, and guess what, Archie? They've given us all guns." Now, you talk about background checks? The fact that these boys come in, two brothers by the surname of Reed, R-E-A-D, should have immediately rung freaking air raid, sorry, that was freaking, F-R-E-A-K-I-N-G, freaking air raid sirens.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Class, Florida State Congressman, Republican Representative Sean Harrison, announced that his aide, Benjamin Kelly, had been fired after Kelly called two Parkland shooting survivors actors. So the article that I'm looking at, dailymail.co.uk, says that Kelly told a reporter that Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg were actors who travel to various crises when they happen. So the representative fired Benjamin Kelly. So, you've heard these stories before. You've heard that they have crisis actors. I've seen the YouTube videos where the actors are, they're joking, and all of a sudden they say, "Okay, ready, we're gonna start filming," and then serious look goes on the actors' faces. The parents of the alleged victims. I'm talking about Sandy Hook. And then the tears start flowing. But 30 seconds before, it was laughing and joking, and everybody's having a good time. So something's really wrong here. Just wanted to mention that. Guineith, you're talking about background checks, and I think the message that you were trying to deliver is that there is a flawed system. If you want to make sure that criminals don't have guns, how about using the system that we already have in place so that criminals don't have guns? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's that's about the sum of it. And like I say, there was no internet back in the day, okay? But these boys, their names were Chris Reed and Damien Reed, okay? And they had their friend with them, Julian Knight, all right? I would say that even that surname in association with anything to do with guns should have raised immediate red flags for 2 boys of the surname of Reed, given that Chopper Reed, Mark Reed, was one of the most notorious gangsters in Melbourne back in the day, who would draw firearms and kill his enemies in public. So he would be walking down the road, he would see one of his enemies in true Wild West fashion, he would draw a firearm out of his underpants and he would kill his enemies in public. And then he would go and smoke a cigarette and keep walking down the road. That was Mark Reed. Okay?
So, Guineith, are you...
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Are you saying that to be... it is incumbent upon us to be able to protect ourselves? Is that part of this message that you're delivering?
The thing is, yes, there are still people like Mark Reed out there. Okay, I'm sure he inspired a great many people, especially since a Hollywood movie got made out about him, which was called Chopper, imaginatively. But yeah, Archie heard this news when the Reed brothers came into the mission after signing up for the Australian Army. Apparently, it was the reserves. But I don't know. It may have been, it may have been the main army, or it may have been the reserves. I don't know. And saying, "Oh yeah, and Julian was with us," meaning Julian Knight. Julian Knight was with us, and Archie, as soon as they said that, he absolutely hit the roof. And when they left, he really hit the roof. He said, "Don't these people do psychological tests? You could not meet 3 crazier, psychopathic so-and-sos than the Reed brothers and Julian Knight." And he publicly yelled, "One of those boys is going to end up killing a bunch of people." And he did not often fly off the handle, but that day at the mission, he flew off the handle. And he said, "One of those boys is going to end up killing a bunch of people." And Archie might have thought that it was more likely to be one of the Reed brothers, but as it turned out, it was Julian Knight. And he got his guns that he used in the Hoddle Street Massacre, which is one of the 2 main massacres that was used to enforce gun confiscation here in Australia. He got them from the Australian Army. He got them from the Army because somebody in the Australian Army did not do psychological testing and let him into the Australian Army and gave him firearms. And that's,
I've got a comment about that,
and I'd like to... which is mind-bogglingly stupid, in my humble opinion.
I've got a comment about this. I'd like to hear what James Gray has to say about this. James, in our county here in Missouri, the sheriff had a sale, and it was from the evidence lockers, or the evidence room. And what this sale was guns that had been collected, in my opinion, stolen from people and not given back. People who have been arrested, maybe convicted, maybe not. But anyway, the sheriff had a lot of guns. I mean, it was a huge advertisement in the newspaper with all of these guns. And you could go and buy one right from the sheriff, who was selling them and keeping the money in the sheriff's department. Do you have that kind of thing going on? And I think that's stolen property. To me, it is. Just because someone claims that a gun was used in a crime doesn't mean that it's their property. Doesn't mean that they can keep it, in my book. If a gun was evidence, it needs to be returned at some point, or to the family, not just sold and the money kept by the government. James, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I was always under the impression that if a firearm was used in the commission of a crime, they were required to destroy it. I mean, that sounds like the government, the local government, stealing from people to make a profit. That doesn't sound like any kind of due process.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what happens right here in my neck of the woods in Missouri. And if I get the newspaper, I could put it on the website, USA Prepares. I could show it, but it's for real. Now, I know people who went to that sale. They thought, well, this is a good time to get a good deal. Well, to me, that means that the sheriff is trafficking in stolen merchandise, which is a crime. And I said on air that this sale was going to happen. I announced it. And I said, I will not go. I will not participate in buying stolen goods. I won't do it. That's just my thought on it. James, there are plenty of guns in circulation that came into this country illegally. But your kits are absolutely 100% legal. Is that right?
That's correct. As long as you are making it for yourself and you can legally own a firearm, you can buy one of our kits. I'll ship it directly to you through USPS in a nondescript flat rate box, and you make it for yourself, keep it for yourself, and like I said, as long as you are legally allowed to own a firearm, then you can own one of these.
James, we were talking this morning before the broadcast, and I mentioned that you don't have to buy a gun. You can make your own. In many places in the United States, if you have a lathe, if you have these skills, if you want to take a piece of maple or cherry and build a stock and build the barrel and the action, you can make your own. You don't have to buy a Remington or a Colt or a Marlin or a Sturm Ruger. You could make your own absolutely legally. And what you're doing is providing a kit to take some of that labor away, and some of the precision is enhanced because your kits are made in to very tight tolerances, and it's absolutely legal. And class, you've been conned into thinking that a serial number is really important and it's going to stop crime. And to me, that is just fallacious. I don't see how that's going to happen. Now, James, do the feds come out to your place and inspect and demand you prove to them who you sold parts to and that kind of thing?
Absolutely not. Well, when we were first setting up the business, we had discussions with our local ATF office, and just to make sure that everything that we were doing was above the board, and that we didn't have to get licenses for the products that we were doing, and all of those things. And it was good discussions with them telling us that we were doing everything right and that we had no requirement to report any of this stuff. We don't have anybody asking us for who we're selling to. We don't retain any kind of credit information or anything like that. So basically nobody's asking us.
Yeah. Do you find that you have any detractors in what you're doing? Do people say to you, that's wrong, what you're doing? Have you come across that in your travels? People friends, if you go to somebody's house and you're at the cookout or something in the backyard. So, Jim, what do you do? And then you tell them, and has anyone said, oh my God, you're part of the criminal element? Have they done that? Have they mistaken what you do as not being above board?
Very, very. We've been in business, like I said, since about 2013. So, of course, we've run across one or two people like that. But to be honest with you, we come from a very rural countryside area. I grew up on a farm. I know how to plant corn and potatoes and cook them and eat them. I hunt deer. So most of the people that I deal with on a regular basis, most of my friends and family are the same type of people, farmers and hunters and hobbyists and,
Okay. When we come back, James, please let us know your final thoughts. We've got about a 7-minute segment coming up when we return. James Gray's with us, guns80.com. Guineith Isaacs is with us, live in Australia as well. And, James, I mentioned before the broadcast when you and I were on an off-air conversation, I mentioned that I thought that gun manufacturers are going to start having sales because of the amount of negative news that's being reported to keep their sales going. And then I said, and after that, then what will happen is I think that as we get closer to gun confiscation, there will be a resurgence in sales. And that's my opinion, and I believe that you thought that might actually happen as well. If you'd like to comment on that, or comment on the student protests all across the country. What about the risk of security for lining these students up?
Yeah. Hey, we're all going to stand outside at a certain time for 17 minutes as a protest. Okay, so now we know where all of the children are going to be standing at a certain time on a certain day. That doesn't sound very safe to me. I mean, at least when they're in school as an enclosed environment, you know, they can at least control who can access those areas and everything, and there is some safety in that, but everybody decides to walk out and stand outside. That doesn't sound like a good idea.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, class, think about that. Think about if your son or daughter says, you know, I'm just going to walk out and put myself in harm's way. Really compare that to the safety that they have now. And really, I mean, they're making themselves more of an easy target. And James, what do you think about what I mentioned with the manufacturers having sales to encourage gun ownership, and then the panic beginning as confiscation gets closer?
I think we'll see every bit of exactly what you said. I mean, personally, as a company owner, you know, I was sitting here during the break and looking at my USA Prepares coffee mug that I'm drinking my coffee out of, and I was thinking to myself, why is it that we got into this business in the first place? You know, it wasn't to try to sell rifles. We're not trying to sell a gun to people. What we're trying to do, and the reason why we came to the USA Prepare Expo and why I come on your program, is because what we want to do is we want people to buy these kits and learn how to build their own rifle. By building your own rifle, you learn how to fix your own rifle, and then you can be prepared for basically any situation, you know. And your program is one of those programs where it's focusing more on learning how to do things and learning how to take care of yourself and do things on your own. And that's really what we're all about, too.
I know a young professional woman on the East Coast, and she bought one of your kits because she wanted to learn how it all works. She bought one of your kits. She bought a drill press. She bought the drill bits, you know, that she thought she might need. She bought a XY vise so that she could accurately hold down the lower receiver as she was drilling it out. I mean, she did all that. Why? Because she wanted to learn how this all works from the ground up. And she did it. Okay? And I know some of her friends who have done the same thing. And they thought, wow, she's doing it. I can do it. So they built their own. Now, the caveat is you can't take these parts to a gun store, you know, your local gun shop, your gunsmith, and say, hey, I got this kit. Would you build this for me, right? You've got to do it yourself. Isn't that the way it works?
That is correct.
And what level of expertise would a person have to have in the remaining 20 seconds to build one of your kits or a kit?
Real quick, it doesn't take a whole lot of expertise, and we actually help you out along the way. You can email us just about any time, day or night, and I'll respond back to you and help you work out any problems you've got. And in fact, we've actually started a new program where we're going to have a lower milling insurance that you can add to your purchase, so that if you are hesitant about it because you might mess up your $100 lower, you know what? You mess it up and it's inoperational, take a picture of it and we'll send you a new one.
James Gray, thank you so much for being with us. Guineith's going to stick with us for hour number 2. Guns80.com. Guns80.com. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Guineith, I think for those who are new to the broadcast that they're getting the sense that we are giving firsthand experience in many, many cases here live on the air. You've talked about experiences that your husband has shared with you, and off the air between the break, you mentioned that you had some more information. But James Gray, I know him. James Gray is a guy who says or he means what he says. He backs up his products, and he's willing to say it on the air. He's not hiding. And just to make sure, what I did was I drove to Virginia, to Roanoke, Virginia. I wanted to see his facility. So Mrs. Finelli and I hopped in the truck, drove out there, and we spent the day there. Did we have to? No. Is it required? No. But we did. And they're for real. And there are people who seem to think that you absolutely, positively have to buy a pre-manufactured rifle or pistol from somebody. You've got to get it from somebody else. That you can't make one yourself. You can make one from start to stop in many places in the United States all by yourself. And if you do, in many places, you don't have to tell anybody that you did it. And it's not illegal not to tell anybody. Think of it like making your own refrigerator. If you've got the skill to do that, go ahead. Seriously. So if you're interested in protecting yourself, I'm not trying to sell guns, but if you're interested in protecting yourself, while it's still relatively uncomplicated, I suggest you consider it. Talk about it with your family. But don't get one if you don't feel that you're going to be able to use it if you have to. You don't want somebody taking it from you and using it against you. So the discussion that I've had with our family is, all right, you can do this around the kitchen table as we have many times. If we are in a situation where we are threatened with death, someone bursts in and they're going to kill us, are we going to surrender or are we going to come out fighting? What are we going to do? Are we going to defend ourselves? For real. If we have to take someone's life to protect our children, to protect us, will we do it? That's the question you need to ask yourself. And if the answer is no, then you're not going to protect your family and yourself, then don't get one. I had some Amish people over here, and we're having lunch at the farm. And I don't know, the topic of guns came up, and they said, no, they don't have them. They don't want them. I said, so what happens if you're threatened? What happens if someone's going to try to kill you? Now, the Amish are pretty strong. They really are. They're physically active. So I think it'd be kind of tough to take one down to begin with. Well, they said that they really didn't like the violence. I said, okay. So your wife is being attacked, and it looks like she might get killed. Would you use a gun at that point? And they all said, no. That's not the case in my house. That's for sure. That's not the case in my house. Guineith, your thoughts?
Okay. First of all, if in Australia you have an unregistered firearm, you're looking at a prison sentence. Okay. And if you want to get your firearm registered, you have to allow the local law enforcement to have a look through your house. And I'm not happy to do that, given that the local law enforcement has in the past threatened to come around to my house in the middle of the night. A rather large, bald man who's actually still a cop after all that, and he still works in this local area. He was demoted for a time, but I actually saw him in uniform the other day up the street, and I almost could not believe my eyes that this cop, he is known, he's a hospitalized woman, in unprovoked attacks. He's sex racketeering, multiple times reported to the complaints department of the Victoria Police from women around here. And he's still on duty as a policeman in the local town up the road. And his name's Brad Hyatt, by the way. So there we go. There's some publicity for our local bad cop. You know something? I don't have firearms here because it's just not worth the risk for me. because there are people who are friendly around here and there are people who are unfriendly. But I do have other weapons, okay? And I would be prepared to use them to defend my life, to defend my family's life, and to defend my property. I do have other weapons. And do you know something? A piece of string is an absolutely deadly weapon. It absolutely is. A plastic bag's a deadly weapon. There have been murders committed with plastic bags. You know, how do you define a deadly weapon? You can make almost anything into a deadly weapon. Now, do you mind if I go into the details of what happened in our town of Wedderburn when they had the massacre up there? The detail. Would you be happy with me sharing those details on air?
Please do.
Okay. Now, I drove past that spot on that night about 20 minutes before the massacre happened because it was a Wednesday night and we were going to have a Bible study at our church, and I was going to have a feed of chips with my son at the chip shop, and then we were going to go to the church to have our Bible study. And what happened was we were sitting outside enjoying our evening out, and we saw the police cars coming in, the barricades going up, etc., down the road. And I said, "Hey, son, there's something going on down there." So as you do, you walk down the road and you rubberneck. And that was the night of the Wedderburn massacre, okay? A guy went crazy. The official press report was he went crazy with a firearm and killed some people locally. That's not the entire truth. I later learned from a local that his first weapon of attack was a kitchen knife. And he broke into the house and grabbed somebody by the head, pushed their neck back, and basically almost decapitated them with a kitchen knife. That was the first fatality. It was only after that he produced the firearm. And the firearm was registered. So, gun registrations would not have stopped that massacre. That guy was a legally registered, he had a firearms license that was a legally registered firearm. He just flipped out one evening. And the other thing is it wouldn't have stopped the massacre because he would have kept going with the kitchen knife if he hadn't had the firearm. Okay? And if anyone here thinks that it's impossible to do damage with a kitchen knife, you need to go and have a look at what the Muslims do. And on my farm, because I don't have firearms, when I need to euthanize a sheep to fill the, when we have sheep, we don't have any sheep at the moment, but when I need to feed something like our tummies and I need to go into the chicken pen, usually it's a kitchen knife, a very, very sharp one that I carry with me. And if I have any stock go down, it's a kitchen knife that I use to euthanize the livestock. And there is an absolute way to do that humanely, which is known to myself, which is known to just about every farmer who lives around here. Okay? And you can kill a horse that way, humanely, with a kitchen knife. And every farmer knows it. Okay? And it's before firearms were invented, it's the way it was always done. But the thing is, that the take-home message is, gun registration did not save anybody's life on that night of the Wedderburn massacre because he started with a kitchen knife. And what are you going to do? Are you going to ban kitchen knives? Of course, I use a kitchen knife for cooking my evening meal. It's not, I'm not going to go crazy with a kitchen knife. Neither is most of the population out there of the world. But, people will find some way to kill people. Other people, if they are unbalanced, will find a way to go out there and slaughter their fellow humans. They just will. You've got to realize you've got to have some way of defending yourself. And although we don't have firearms here, I have other projectile firing devices, and I have the know-how to be able to manufacture those projectile firing devices on my own, and I'm accurate with them. And, so if somebody came around here in the middle of the night seeking to do me harm, I would absolutely defend my house and my family, because they are really, really, really precious to me. Am I going to go out and seek vengeance? No, it's not in my nature to do so. Absolutely not. But you've got to be aware. It's a bad world out there, and you have to somehow be able to protect yourself. Yep, that's the break coming up. I think
we're going
to
into
be back after the break with the USDA information.
Yeah, I've got a couple other comments before that, but you mentioned harm that can be done with a piece of string. I'm going to mention that when we come back. I've got a couple comments on some of the things that you've mentioned. Guineith, you mentioned you can kill somebody with a piece of string. Well, governments have done that. They've taken one string and combined it with others, and they've made a piece of rope out of it, and they've hung people. Public hangings. People have.
Yeah, it's such time in British history, such a common method of killing people, that it became a scandal and a public relations disaster, because they were hanging so many people in London town. And so they had to figure out something to do with all these petty criminals, so they started sending them to Australia.
Yeah.
And pieces of string are absolutely a deadly weapon.
Yeah, and if you look at some of the packaging of equipment that you buy, let's say you buy a piece of electronic gear to use in your house. Let's say it's a DVD player, for example. The DVD player will be in a box, and then there'll be some styrofoam in there, and then there'll be in the center of the styrofoam will be the DVD player wrapped in a plastic bag. And then the plastic bag will tell you that be careful, you could die from suffocation with this plastic bag. It says right on the bag. So You mentioned plastic bags. Now, there's a training session that I went to. I participated in it. It was about home invasions. And the instructor was really interesting. And he said, okay, so literally it was at my house. And my son and I were, it was our turn to be the victims of a home invasion. So 3 guys were going to come into our house. This was all agreed upon. They were going to come in. They were going to ring the front doorbell. But, it was just kind of a warm day, so the instructor said, we'll leave all the doors open. We'll ring the doorbell, and then 30 seconds later, we're going to come in. And you guys take whatever guns you want. You can, shotguns, revolvers, 45s, 9mm. Pick whatever you want, and we'll take the rest. So we got first choice. And we used wax bullets and real guns. And I'm talking about crayon wax. Pretty hard. And we were all shot. I was, my son was. There are dents in the kitchen from, where the shots missed us. We had face masks on, and T-shirts. So if you got shot, you got a hole in your shirt and you're bleeding. If you got shot in the neck, it would have been terrible. But none of that happened, and it was really realistic. I mean, it was quite realistic. And the instructor said to us, when after we'd been shot, before we started this, he goes, all right, look, no tripwires. So when we come after you, don't set anything up where you're going to trip us and we're going to fall down and then you're going to shoot us. Can't do that. That's not fair. Really. Well, they didn't ring the doorbell. They synchronized their watches, and one guy came in each door simultaneously, and they didn't say, hey, raise your hands. This is a home invasion. Play nice and nobody gets hurt. That's not what happened. They came in shooting. They didn't even say, hey. They just came through the door silently and started shooting. That was a real wake-up call. It was a real wake-up call. And so tripwires are not legal in the United States. You can't have a wire that's going to be attached to something that's going to harm somebody coming in. So if you think that the law is going to come in to your house, and you go, I think they're going to come in the front door. So let's just have this piece of piano wire across the front entrance. They come running in, and boom, they all fall on top of each other. It's not legal in the United States. You can't do that. Can you imagine that? These guys are allowed to come in with whatever they want. Tear gas, stun grenades, flashbangs, smoke grenades, rocket launchers. They can do whatever they want. They can even bring a tank. But you can't have a tripwire. But I do want to say...
What's that saying, all fair in love and war?
That's kind of, yeah. We come back, I'd like to read to you what the Missouri State Constitutional Provision, Article 1, Section 23 says about Missouri and guns. Pretty cool. We'll be right back. So, I have in my hands a delightful packet of information from an organization called USDA. I think that is pronounced USDA. So, in this envelope, and it's a thick envelope, it has a return address of Census of Agriculture, National Agricultural Statistics Service, and then the P.O. Box in Jeffersonville, Indiana. So I have this in my hand, and there's the return envelope, and it has 4 pages of instructions, fine print. I mean, this is not 8.5 by 11. This is way bigger than a legal size sheet of paper. Very small print. 4 pages of instructions. And then it says, there's a letter, Dear Farmer or Rancher, according to our records, we have not received your 2017 Census of Agriculture form. And then they are kind enough to threaten you by telling you that your response is required by law. And it's signed by a guy, interesting name, Hubert. His last name is Hammer. I wonder if his middle name is Sledge. Hubert Sledgehammer. Anyway, so I put those pieces of paper aside, and I have in my hands the fun part. Now, this looks like a tax form. Now, it's a booklet, and it's stapled, and it is 16 pages. It's 1/6. Now, this booklet of information that the USDA says is required does comply with the it says right on here, that it complies with the Paperwork Reduction Act of 1995.
That's funny.
Oh,
that's
okay.
hilarious.
Well, the fun is over, because I'd like to read some of this, if that's okay with you, Guineith.
Yeah, that's
now, class,
fine.
you may think this is boring. I'll bet you that there's not a single other radio broadcast in the country who will do this. Talk about exactly what is being demanded of farmers. Now, if you don't think this is an invasion, if you don't think this is an assault, if you don't think this is prying for information that they have no business to, in the state of Missouri, we have an amendment to the Missouri Constitution that says we have the right to farm, because a whole bunch of stupid people decided that we needed to have an amendment that says we could do what we could do before the amendment. The only thing is, since we have the amendment, now we can be inspected and detected by the government. More. Now, it is not in my interest to raise anything that's going to make anybody sick, because if I do, I'm out of business. All right. So it has the person's barcode. It has the survey number. It has the person's address. So this booklet is personalized. And they want, on page 1, they want some things like, there's some official use only boxes, but below that it says, complete your report by mail or via the internet at www.agcounts.usda.gov. Your report is due by February 5th, 2018. And they want you, then they ask you for your name, then your area code and phone number, then the date completed, and your email address. Sounds pretty invasive for a census form to me already. That's just page 1. Okay, page 2. Acreage, this is just section 1 on page 2. This is all small fine print, by the way. And you fill in these boxes. Report land owned, rented, or used by your spouse or by the partnership, corporation, or organization named on the front of this form. Include all land regardless of location or use. Cropland, Conservation Reserve Program, wetlands, Wetlands Reserve Program, pasture land, rangeland, woodland, idle land, farmsteads, etc. Enter the number of acres owned. Then they want to know total number of acres rented or leased from others. Include land worked by you on shares, land used rent-free in exchange for services, payment of taxes, etc., federal, state, and railroad and leased land on a per-acre basis, land rented or leased by you for cash. Exclude land used on a fee per head or animal unit month basis. We've now completed less than 1/4 of page 2. Wow. They want to know the number of acres rented or leased to others. Include worked on shares by others, subleased, rented, leased to others for cash. Goes on and on. How many acres rented or leased to others, box C, did this operation own? Then you add box A, box B, minus box C, and that it gives you box D. And it tells you a little bit about how to continue with this. Did this operation pay on a fee per head or animal unit month basis to use any land? If so, how many acres? Do not include those acres in the boxes above. If you did, go back and exclude them from the boxes above and recalculate box D. Considering the total acres in box D, in what county was the largest value of the operation's agricultural products raised or produced? The principal county name they want the state, and they want the number of acres. If this operation had agriculture activity in any other county, enter the county names, etc. So they want the county, the state, and the number of acres. Again, now we're on page 3. Report how many acres, and by the way, I'm having a tough time because this is really small print. Report the number of acres in box D on the previous page. For acres used for more than one purpose, report them in the first item that applies. Report each acre only once. Cropland. Cropland A, B, C, and D. Then they want to know about pasture. Permanent pasture and rangeland. Woodland pastured. Other pasture and grazing land, including rotational pasture. That could have been used for crops without additional improvements. Woodland not pastured, they want to know woodlands, timber tracts, and sugar bush. They want all other land, farmsteads, home, building, livestock facilities, ponds, roads, watershed, etc. They want a total of all that. Then we can go to page 4. Now, by the way, that would take me, in order to figure that out, I already got a day in this. Okay, and now I'm on page 4. In 2017, did this operation rent or lease any cropland or pasture acres from others for cash? Exclude land rented or leased on a share basis. Okay. How many acres of non-irrigated cropland were rented or leased for cash? Include fruit, nut, berry, vineyard, nursery, and hayland. How many acres of irrigated cropland were rented or leased for cash? How many acres of permanent pasture, grazing, and grassland were rented or leased for cash? Section 4. Land use practices. During 2017, considering the total acreage in this operation, how many acres were drained by tile? How many were artificially drained by ditches? How many were under a conservation easement? During 2017, considering the cropland acres on the operation, how many acres were no-till drill practices used? How many were reduced, conserved, tillage, excluding no-till drill practices? How many were intensively used? What was planted as a cover crop? Cover crops are primarily managing soil fertility, soil quality, controlling weeds, pests, and diseases. Exclude CRP acres. This thing is nothing but more and more and more. It goes on to farm labor. I'm excluding a lot of what's on these pages. A lot. What were the number of hired farm or ranch workers, including paid family members and office workers, who worked less than 150 days on this operation? Exclude contract labor. Worked 150 days or more on this operation? Exclude contract labor. What was the number of unpaid farm or ranch workers, including family members and office workers, who worked on this farm or ranch? What was the number of foreign and domestic immigrant workers on this operation in 2017?
I suppose it's going to ask if they've got documents now.
Is this, I mean, I know this doesn't make sense to...
Crazy.
Oh,
I'm laughing, but it's I don't know, oh my gosh.
Okay, crop insurance, Section 6. How many acres of this operation were covered under any crop insurance policy in 2017? How many acres of this operation were controlled in the Conservation Reserve Program, Wetlands Reserve Program, Farmable Wetlands Program, or Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program? What was the total amount received in 2017 for participation in these programs? What was they ought to know, because they send out the checks. The same guys, the U.S., they're involved in sending out the checks for this stuff. So they're asking you how much they sent you. Really? Okay. We don't participate in this nonsense with them. We don't accept their money. What was the amount received in 2017 for all federal agricultural program payments? What was the amount received in 2017 for state and local government agricultural program payments? What was the amount received in 2017 for the Commodity Credit Corporation loans? What was the total amount spent in 2017 to repay Commodity Credit Corporation loans? Do you know that you have the right to appeal any adverse program decision by the U.S. does National Appeals Division? Yes or no? That goes on to Section 7. I'll continue. If yes, more than 50% of the assets of the operation are owned by one of the operator's members of their household and or other persons related to them by blood, marriage, adoption, including relatives not residing in his or her household. Consider only farm and ranch assets owned, not rented or leased by the operation, and include the assets held by non-family landlords. Was this operation organized as a limited liability corporation under state law? What was the operator's legal status for tax purposes? Family or individual operation, partnership, including family partnerships, incorporated under state law, or other, such as estates, trust, prison, farm, grazing association, American Indian reservation, specify the type. How many households shared in the net farm income of this operation? Moving on to page 6. Personal characteristics. How many men and women were involved in discussions for this operation, including family members and hired managers? Oh, this is nothing. I haven't gotten to the good stuff yet. Exclude hired workers unless they were a hired manager or a family member. Okay. Answer the following questions for up to 4 individuals who were involved in the decisions for this operation as of December 31st, 2017. Each person's full name. Is the person completing this form?
I was going to say, they're not going to ask you to name them, are they?
Yes, they are. Yes. Oh, they want to know the sex of the person. They want to know what was the person's age on December 31st, 2017. Is this person Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin? What is the race? Now, they give you some choices. You can be white. You can be black or African American. You can be American Indian or Alaskan Native. Or you can be an Asian, or you can be a Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. Pick one. Then it wants to know, at which occupation did this person spend the majority, 50% or more, of his or her work time? Farm or ranch work, or work other than farming and ranching? Is this person retired from farming? Yes or no? How many days did this person work off the farm in 2017, include days which the person worked at least 4 hours per day on an off-farm job, including work on someone else's farm for pay? Section 8. Can you see where this is really complicated and no one will ever be able, you can't get this right. It's impossible. And then, and your name's on the front. Okay. Did this person live on the operation? In what year did the person begin to operate any part of this operation? In what year did this person begin to operate any farm operation? That's any farm operation. The other question was this farm operation. Has this person ever served active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces, Reserves, or National Guard?
See where this is going.
How many people have lived on this person's household? In this person's household. Was the person hired and paid a salary or wages to manage the operation? Then it wants to know, was this person involved in any of the specific decisions for, as of December 31st, for each person and each item? That's day-to-day decisions. And these are matrices. This is, even though I'm reading one sentence, it's got 4 responses that you have to fill out for each person. Land use and, they want to know who is making decisions. I haven't gotten through half of the questions. Then they want to...
We're heading into the final segment. Would I be able to make a comment?
This is it. You got to make it now. We only have 20 seconds. Make it now, please. Okay.
You need to write on that form, I plead the Fifth Amendment, UCC 1/308, on every page and send it back to them.
I plead the Fifth Amendment. What was the rest of it?
I plead the Fifth Amendment.
Yep.
UCC 1/308.
Guineith, thanks so much for being with us.
Write it on every page and send it back to them.
Thanks so much.